Hello, welcome to another Liam A6 video. I'm really dizzy from that, actually. Today, I'm going to be talking about the AYN Thor and the Steam Deck and whether or not it's a good idea to replace your Steam Deck with a Thor. So I'm just going to get a few things out of the way here. It's pretty obvious that the Steam Deck is a lot more powerful than the Thor, but at similar price points, and while you can't actually buy a new Steam Deck right now, or at least not at the time of recording this video, it's a valid question to ask whether or not it's a good idea to either replace your current Steam Deck with a Thor or just buy a Thor instead of a Steam Deck. First, I'm going to cover the specs of both, just so you know exactly what we're working with here. The Thor comes with two screens, so perfect for 3DS emulation or regular DS emulation. The top screen is a 6-inch AMOLED touchscreen. It's 1920 by 1080p. It runs at 120 hertz and max brightness of 650 nits. While the bottom screen is a 3.92-inch AMOLED touchscreen running at 1240 by 1080p, pushing 60 hertz and a max brightness of 550 nits. Now, there's a few different models for the Thor. The one I have here is the Thor Pro. The light model comes with the Snapdragon 865, while the base, Pro, and Max models all come with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. As for RAM, the light and the base models come with 8 gigabytes. The model that I have here, the Pro, comes with 12 gigabytes, while the Max model comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM. As for the Steam Deck, it has a 7.4-inch HDR OLED 1280 by 800p touchscreen, and it runs at 90 hertz. So the screens on these things are pretty comparable. It's actually a little bit more impressive on the Thor for whatever reason. It's got a higher pixel density since the screen is smaller and the resolution is larger, and it's got two of the screens. The only advantage here that the Steam Deck has is that it has HDR, which would be nice on the Thor, but it's probably asking for a little too much. 1080p is already overkill for the Thor, if you ask me. Most of the games that I run are only at 720p. As for the chip, the Steam Deck has the AMD Zen 2 processor and 16 gigabytes of RAM, and you can get either 512 gigabytes or 1 terabyte of storage. This is only the OLED model. For this comparison, I'm just comparing the Thor Pro with the Steam Deck OLED. Now that we have the specs out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about build quality. Now, I actually don't own this Steam Deck. My buddy actually let me borrow this for this video, but I have had a ROG Ally that I've used quite a lot, actually. I've even replaced the battery in it since the battery life was pretty brutal. I think it's a little bit better on the Steam Deck since the screen specs are a bit lower than the Ally, but nonetheless, comparing the ROG Ally with the Steam Deck's build quality is far superior, if you ask me. The ergonomics on the Steam Deck are just perfect. Like, I don't think I would even change anything about it. The touchpads are super intuitive, which I really like. Looking at the controls, you have the arrow pad and the left analog stick next to each other, same with the right analog stick and the buttons, and I'm not really used to that. I'm more used to an Xbox style layout, which is kind of why I thought the ROG Ally would work better for me. But surprisingly enough, the Steam Deck has way better ergonomics and better feeling just hitting the buttons and where they're placed, and I do not notice that shift where the buttons are at all in comparison. And I'm used to an Xbox controller, so that's kind of saying something. But back to the build quality of both. They're both very well built, in my opinion. I do like the extra protection that the clamshell has over the Steam Deck. I feel like the Steam Deck is pretty much required to have a case over it when you're traveling, and a large one at that. The thing as a whole takes up quite a bit more space than the Thor, and the Thor can close and blocks any sort of dust or anything getting into the buttons and the analog sticks, as well as protecting the screen. So I do really like that part of the Thor over the Steam Deck. I'd be kind of nervous with the Steam Deck just kind of loosely jingling around in a bag or something like that. Now, the Thor does struggle a little bit in the ergonomics department. It's built like a Nintendo DS, so that's not really a surprise to anybody. They do sell a grip that you can put onto the Thor, and it does make it a lot better. In my opinion, it's necessary for sure, especially with first-person shooters, where it's a little harder to reach the bottom right analog stick to change your view. So I definitely do appreciate the grip there, and I do think it is necessary for sure. But all in all, in terms of ergonomics, I think the Steam Deck wins this one for sure. But in terms of build quality, I'd say they're pretty much on par with each other. They're both built really well. The hinge does make me a little nervous on the Thor, like opening and closing it. I have seen on the subreddit a lot of people complaining about their hinges breaking or a micro crack in the plastic on the hinge if you use it too much. Now, I have not experienced that myself, but there's been a lot of people talking about it on the Reddit, and it's making me a little bit nervous. So I don't know.
Leave me alone!
Akira!
Pretty obvious the Thor would be a little bit lighter. It's quite a bit smaller than the Steam Deck. It's weighing in at only 380 grams, while the Steam Deck, I believe, is about 640 grams. So it is quite a bit heavier, but Steam Deck is actually surprisingly light for how large it is. So that is pretty impressive they were able to make it that light. Now, in terms of gameplay, it's no secret that the Steam Deck blows the Thor out of the water. The Thor is running Android while the Steam Deck is running Linux, and the Steam Deck has way more support for games than the Thor, and it's not even close. Now, the Thor is actually pretty impressive in a lot of areas, especially for its size and what it's running. It's basically an Android phone with a controller slapped onto it, and it works surprisingly well, but the compatibility department is lacking. There's a lot of games that you can't actually play online. There's a lot of anti-cheat software that kind of butts heads with the emulation software on the Thor. I actually made a TikTok and a short recently about this. I had Rocket League running perfectly, and they added easy anti-cheat, which broke online for the Thor, which is really unfortunate because I had it running at like 60 FPS. It was great. There are still some other games you can play online, and it's not really what the Thor was meant to do anyway. So the big question here is whether or not you can replace your Steam Deck with a Thor, and that has everything to do with what you are using the Steam Deck for. Now, personally, I've had a PC handheld at the same time as having a decent gaming computer itself, and I find myself not really picking up the PC handheld to do anything with it since I have a better PC experience in my room. Like, I can just play games here, and I don't really play PC games when I'm on the go, or at least I don't feel inclined to do that. With the exception of Rocket League, I would take my handheld to a buddy's place and play Rocket League with them, and it was good. But you can see here I was testing out some Elden Ring, and it did not go so well for the Thor. The Thor really struggled to stay above that like 10 frames per second benchmark, which is not good enough to play that game, but it's really impressive it can run it, and there's other PC games it can definitely run. If you're playing things like side scrollers, platformers, isometric games, top-down sort of games, it performs surprisingly well, and having it in such a small form factor is super valuable to me. I've brought my Ally around before, like on a plane and everything else, and it's just a real hassle to pull out. It's such a big piece of technology that it's very intrusive, and it feels, I don't know, it's too big, it's too much. There's too much happening, and I personally prefer that smaller form factor. Kind of just reminds me of the days where you can just pull out your DS, start playing a game, close it, you're good to go. There's no issue there, but with the Steam Deck, it's not quite that easy. Now, in terms of performance, like I said, the Steam Deck blows the Thor out of the water, but for emulation, it's not really that simple. I tested Tears of the Kingdom on both the Steam Deck and the Thor, and surprisingly enough, the Thor outperformed the Steam Deck, and I'm still not really sure why. I'm wondering if maybe it has to do with driver support, more people wanting to emulate on these Android handhelds. There's a lot of support around the Odin 2, which runs the exact same chip, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, as the Thor. So there's a lot of driver support there, specifically for emulation, because that's basically what these things were built for, these Android handhelds. But in Tears of the Kingdom, I was getting like 30 to 40 frames per second. I think it was capped at 30, actually. I don't have any mods on my Tears of the Kingdom, so I'm pretty sure it was capped at 30, but my FPS counter still goes above that, and so it was clocking in like anywhere between 20 and 40, which I thought was pretty good. Like, that's playable. That's like, that 30 range is kind of the sweet spot, because you're basically duplicating the performance of a Switch 1, which is ideally what you want. But the Steam Deck, it couldn't get over 20 for the life of it. It was capped at 20, and every once in a while, like if you look down at the ground or looked up at the sky, it would go up to 30, but beyond that, it just wasn't, and I tried everything. I tried tweaking the settings, and nothing really seemed to improve its performance. So I was quite impressed with the Thor in this front, and I guess it's no secret that the Thor would be better at emulating than the Steam Deck, mainly because of the form factor, though. I didn't think, like, the hardware is way better on the Steam Deck on paper. So I thought this was kind of a neat find and really interesting. So if emulation is something that you're interested in, the Thor is definitely a contender here and could even outperform the Steam Deck in some cases. One thing to also think about with the Steam Deck and the Thor is that the Steam Deck is plug and play. You set it up, you have all your games there, you're good to go. The Thor is not so easy. You set up the Thor and you're looking at an Android phone. That's basically all you can see. So you need to set up your own front end, you need to add your own game ROMs, you need to scrape for the game ROM data, so like box art, game descriptions, game titles, everything. You need to do that all manually, which is a little bit difficult. It's definitely annoying, and it can take hours to get set up the way you want it. Now, a lot of people have fun with that. Like, I personally enjoy that aspect of it, but I can see some people not wanting to do that after dropping $500 on a handheld. They probably just want to play it, and that's totally understandable. It's safe to say the Steam Deck has a more fluid experience, especially with the user interface. The Thor is good, and if you set up the right front end, like I'm using Cocoon Launcher, it's a front end launcher you can set up with Android. I don't ever have to see the Android UI, or very rarely anyway, but that does work really well, and I have my home button bound so that it just goes right back to the launcher, and I just don't touch Android whatsoever. But you do need to set it up yourself. Whereas with the Steam Deck, it's just plug and play. It's good to go. You have Steam OS there, and it all runs really well. It's really smooth, and it's been out for a long time, and there's a lot of support for it. You got a pretty big company backing that one, whereas with Cocoon is a smaller project done for free, essentially. I think these developers, I'm not even sure they're being paid. I'm pretty sure it's in beta stages right now, so it's not perfect, but it's really good, and I think it's the best, honestly, for the Thor. Now, in terms of emulating any other games below the Switch on the Thor or Steam Deck, both are going to handle them no problem whatsoever. I personally wouldn't want to emulate a DS or 3DS game on the Steam Deck. Having that dual screen right next to each other, just on one screen on the Steam Deck, does not sound nearly as fun or nostalgic as having the top screen, bottom screen setup that you do on the Thor. If emulation is something that you care a lot about, the Thor is definitely the way to go here. To answer the overall question, can a AYN Thor replace your Steam Deck? I would say it depends on the type of person that you are. If you prefer PC gaming and all your library is in Steam and that's all you care about, you definitely want to go with the Steam Deck here. But if you want to dabble in emulation and don't really care that much about PC gaming, or only have a handful of low power games or low requirement games in your Steam library, then I'd say the Thor is a very good contender here. And I think if you want something that's smaller, more portable, better battery life, honestly, the Thor is definitely the move here. When I first got my ROG Ally, I didn't think I'd care too much about how big it was. I figured, yeah, it's obviously going to be big. It's a PC. The fact you can pack it into such a small package already is impressive. But in practice, I didn't find myself pulling it out to use it. It's just so clunky and large, and I haven't had a whole lot of time with the Steam Deck, but I feel like the issue would be the same. Now, the Steam Deck is better in terms of size than the Ally. Now, the Ally has a smaller footprint, but it is thicker than the Steam Deck. So the Steam Deck does feel lighter. Ergonomics are better. Like with the Ally, I was always worried I was gonna drop it, but the Thor blows both out of the water completely. I find myself picking up the Thor pretty regularly just to play whatever game I have on there. A lot of PC games, honestly, do work well on the Thor. Hollow Knight runs great, and Megabonk has actually been one of my favorite games to play for the PC recently, and it runs really well on the Thor, surprisingly well. I don't think I'd want to pick up a Steam Deck to play Megabonk. I'd rather pick up my Thor. Anyway, back to the question. If you're big into PC games, Steam Deck's the way to go. If you're big into Android gaming, emulation, light PC gaming, then the Thor is definitely for you. Anyway, everybody, thank you for watching my video. This is slightly different than my usual videos. I normally just do testing videos, so yeah, I wanted to do a comparison video. I don't have this Steam Deck for very long, so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to maybe compare the two. Not really a fair comparison, but there might be some people out there who are considering one or the other, so hopefully this helps. If you want to see some testing of different games, I do have that on my channel. You can go check that out. And yeah, thank you again, and also thank you for 1,000 subs. This is super epic. I did not think I would get 1,000 subs, but here I am. So this is very cool. I apologize for all the ads you're gonna see.